In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The Lord be with you. We are talking about a very interesting gospel passage that maybe doesn't sound a little too Jesus-y if we think about it. Because Jesus tells us that we have to hate the people who are in our lives if we want to be his followers. And that doesn't sound very Jesus-y to me. Does that sound Jesus-y to you? Does that sound Jesus-y to you over here? If we have to hate people, does that sound like Jesus? No, I don't think so. Well, what are some of the things that we think about when we say that we hate certain things? Delilah, are there some things that you hate? Like what? Reading. You hate reading. What else? Does anybody else have something that you hate over here? Broccoli. We say, I hate broccoli. I hate doing my homework, right? I hate it when my mom and dad are always trying to tell me what to do. Sometimes we use that word hate as an exaggeration, right? Sometimes I see a lot of us wearing athletic jerseys, right? And so we might say things like, I hate the Raiders, right? We might hear somebody say that. I see some U of A apparel here, and I think it's safe to say that the University of Arizona hates Arizona State University, and the other way around. I think that the inverse is true. Right? So we say hate, and we talk about it kind of as an exaggeration. Sometimes we mean it literally. Sometimes we say things like, I hate it when people are mean to each other, or I hate it when people say mean things to each other. Or some people hate people who are different than they are. They hate people when they have different color skin, or maybe they practice a different religion, or maybe because they live in a different part of the world. So hate is kind of a loaded word. It kind of has a lot of meanings. So why would Jesus tell us that if we want to be his followers, that we have to hate the people in our lives? Well, here's the thing. Jesus didn't speak English. He spoke Aramaic. And the Gospel of Luke wasn't written in English, or Aramaic for that matter. It was written in Greek. So we need to find out what it means when we look at that word in Greek and find out what is Jesus actually trying to tell us. Because that word in Greek is miseo. That's the word that we translate to hate, miseo. Now, it is true that a potential translation into English of that word miseo is to hate. But it doesn't have the same level of intensity as that word hate has in English. What that word more appropriately means is to love less than. Right? So we could say, if I hate broccoli, I love broccoli less than I love pizza. That's a true statement. I don't hate broccoli, but I'd rather have pizza. Right? And so what Jesus is telling us is that we shouldn't let those other people or those other things in our lives take the place in our lives that ought to be reserved for God. Now that I can get behind, and that is a Jesus-y thing to say. Because we're not called to put other things or other people in that position that God ought to occupy. And we don't want to let people or things get in our way of our relationship with God and with others. Okay? Now today is kickoff Sunday. Right? We know that. We're all wearing our favorite team's apparel. And it's also the kickoff Sunday for the National Football League. And the Cardinals are playing right now, actually. So I think maybe we have some people who stayed home to watch the Cardinals. That's okay. That's okay, right? Because a 1 p.m. kickoff on the East Coast means a 10 a.m. kickoff here in Arizona, and that's pretty early. But that's nothing compared to what's going on in Hawaii, because it's only 7 a.m. there, and they're already watching their NFL games. So how are we supposed to honor God and our football teams on a Sunday? Well, we kind of have to figure that out, don't we? Because is it bad to watch football? No. But is it bad to let football take precedence over our relationship with God and with others? Well, probably. So in this sense, we have to hate football. Or, to love football less than we love God. Now, as much as I love football, I think that happens to make some pretty good sense. And at the end of the gospel passage, Jesus tells us what it is that's required in order to be his disciples. Well, what do we mean when we talk about disciples? Because aren't the disciples those 12 guys that used to hang out with Jesus? Well, yeah, those guys were disciples. But disciple, or using more Greek, mathetes, means students or followers. So those particular disciples are the people we call the apostles, although they also were disciples. Now, what's the difference between an apostle and a disciple? Because sometimes we use those words interchangeably in English. Well, apostles were disciples who were sent out by Jesus for a specific task of sharing the gospel. And our Bishop Jennifer Redall, is one of the apostles today. That's her calling, is to be an apostle. But all of us who follow Jesus by our own choosing are disciples. And if we want to be disciples, we have to get rid of our possessions and follow Jesus. Do you want to get rid of your possessions? I don't want to get rid of my possessions. Do you want to get rid of all your stuff over here? Do you want to get rid of all your toys? No? No? Are there some toys that are fun and that we like to have? Is it nice to have nice things? I think it's nice to have nice things. So why should we have to get rid of our possessions? Again, there's some nuance here. There's some nuance here. Just like we're not being told we literally have to hate our parents, we're probably also not being told that we have to literally get rid of absolutely everything we own. But we are, however, supposed to make sure that our possessions are not taking priority over that place in our lives where we ought to make sure that God is in our focus. So what do we mean when we talk about our possessions? Well, each of us has to evaluate those relationships we have with those things that we hold dear to us. It's not bad, for instance, if we have a nice car. A lot of us have cars that we've maybe wanted all our lives, and we finally got to get that car, right? It's not a bad thing to have that car, right? But if we love our car more than we love God, well, then that's a problem. That's a problem. It's not bad if I have a favorite toy that I like to play with, but it would be bad if I let my favorite toy take precedence over my relationship with God in my life. I can enjoy football, but I can't let football take precedence over my relationship with God. See the difference there? And since we're at church and we're kicking off our program year, we're going to look at some of our possessions that we have here at church, because we've heard it said that the Episcopal Church is the best kept secret in Christianity. We have great liturgy, we have great theology, we have all the sacraments, we have the historic traditions of the church, we have an open and affirming way to follow Jesus, and I think it's great. So why is it a secret? If we have something so great, then why don't more people know about us? And I have a hypothesis, and it's a hypothesis that maybe isn't going to make everybody happy. Because we as Episcopalians, as a denomination, are not always the best at willing to explore our possessions. We are kind of notorious for getting in our own way. Now, while we are willing to have open, healthy theology, we also have a tendency as a denomination to hold on tight to those things that give us kind of a visible piece of our worshiping identity. See that blue book that's in the pew pocket in front of you? That is our official hymnal in the Episcopal Church. And as you can see on the cover, it says 1982. That's because it was published in 1982. Do you know what else was published in 1982? Me. I was born in 1982. That hymnal, the official hymnal that we use in the Episcopal Church, is the same age as me. And that red book in the pew, the Book of Common Prayer, our new prayer book, as some people call it, published in 1979. The new prayer book is older than I am. Okay? Now, is that bad? No, it's not bad. We have processes in place that help us to update these materials. Right? And the hymnal before the one that we're using now was published in 1940. And the prayer book that was before the one we use now is from 1928. So there's a process in place to update these materials. And I'm sure there will be a new hymnal at some point. And I'm fairly certain that at some point we will have an updated Book of Common Prayer. But we also have supplemental resources that we can use right now. We can use them today. Resources that use more modern takes on our theology and our language. And we have updated musical resources that we have access to. Here at St. John's, we've got screens. We've got screens. Do you know how many parishes have screens like ours? Not that many. Not that many. Okay? But why is it important that we have screens? Well, because we want to be mindful of people who might be seeking a church home who don't know how to use a Book of Common Prayer that's older than I am, right? It's a component of a radical welcome and inclusion. And do you think when these screens were put up that everybody was happy about it? Probably not. Probably not. But we need to make those kinds of changes to be a welcoming and affirming community. It's part of that radical welcome and inclusion. Now here at St. John's, we've been revamping our usage of our digital tools, right? And to the extent that the Diocese of Arizona is consulting with us to ask about our strategy. And in fact, parishes and priests across the country have been reaching out to us and saying, hey, can you help us with this? Right? Because they've seen how we've been putting those tools to work. In the last 4 weeks, we've had over 2 million views across our social media platform. And our website traffic is spiking. Last month, we had an 11% increase in the number of unique visitors to our website. That means people who've never visited our website before. There are eyes on St. John's. There are eyes on St. John's. People are hungry for a healthy way of being the church in the world, and they're actively seeking a place to worship Jesus. And they're thinking of giving us a try. And in fact, a whole lot of people have been giving us a try. Right? We have a lot of people here who've come across us and found us through those methods, including our children's ministry team here. People were seeking something that they didn't find in their previous church, and they've found it here at St. John's. And this means that as a community, we're doing a pretty good job of getting out of our own way, but we can always do better. We can always do better. And our task as Christians in the 21st century is to honor the integrity of our liturgy, but also to be willing to ensure that worship is attainable, meets people where they are. That means we may have to give up some of our proverbial possessions that might bring us comfort in order to make sure that others have a chance to become acquainted with a different way of worship. Because liturgical worship is beautiful, but it can also be intimidating. When do we stand? When do we sit? When do we kneel? What do we say? And when and why do we say those things? Now, for those of us who were raised attending liturgical services, these things can all come very naturally. But for those who haven't, well, then we better offer a smooth path inside the door. Is a Rite One service beautiful? Absolutely it is. Is it going to speak to somebody who has never experienced it and doesn't understand why we're using words that we don't really say anymore? Maybe not. Maybe not. Are the hymns from that blue hymnal? Are they beautiful hymns? Are they timeless even? Yeah, absolutely they are. But are other forms of music, like our joyful noise choir or our praise band, also good to use from time to time? Yes, they are. Multiple things can be true at the same time. And a traditional liturgy is beautiful and meaningful. But a contemporary take on that liturgy can also be beautiful and meaningful. And allowing ourselves to be flexible and adaptable is the way that we as a community are going to share the gospel. Because worship doesn't have to be perfect. And in fact, it's never perfect. There's no such thing as perfect liturgy. Now, do we want, for instance, our children to learn reverence in the worship space? Yes. But is their presence with us here in this worship space conditional? And the answer is no. And trust me, by our kids being here up front, right? They're learning. They're learning. I see it happen. And I have conversations with our children. And I see them learning the responses and learning the flow of the service. Being in the space is formational for our kids. And by welcoming kids into our sanctuary, we're tattooing the liturgy on their hearts because they'll know it forever and they'll love it forever. And they'll continue to appreciate the liturgy for the rest of their lives. I promise. If we don't hate the liturgy, and of course by hate, right, I mean love it less than we love God, then we can't be disciples of Jesus. If we can't give up those possessions that hold the place that God should hold in our lives, then we can't be disciples of Jesus. As we celebrate Kickoff Sunday today, let's be mindful of what it is that we are kicking off. Because we are kicking off a commitment to radical welcome and inclusion. And we're kicking off a commitment to be willing to change and to adapt. We're kicking off a commitment to meet people where they are. We love our liturgy in the Episcopal Church, and we love our worship, but not more than we love our God. And by allowing ourselves to honor the integrity of the liturgy while ensuring that it is attainable to everyone, we demonstrate that God holds that place of honor that God really ought to hold. At St. John's, we're trailblazers. So let's continue to blaze that trail and to bring people to Jesus. Let's continue to model getting out of our comfort zones, just like our patron saint, John the Baptist, and to do things a little bit differently. And as we do things differently, we will continue to share the gospel. And as we share the gospel, we will continue to form more disciples. So be bold, St. John's. Be disciples. Be different. And be unapologetically yourself. And pave for others that path that will lead them to Jesus. Amen.